Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Caleb, and today we'll be doing a review on last year's biggest success in the indie scene and also one of the largest Battle Royale games that are on the market right now. It is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or PUBG as we'll be calling it for the rest of the video. PUBG is currently the best experience for a Battle Royale game mode that is on the market. With its unique blend of realistic gameplay and intense firefights, it really comes into its own and it stands up against the other competitors in the market like Fortnite and H1Z1 King of the Hill. Before we get too far into the review, I do want to talk about some basic stuff first that is very important to understand what PUBG is. So let's talk about the main objectives of PUBG. The main objectives of PUBG is to be the final player or team alive. To get there is easier said than done, however. Now how we get there is, or how the game begins, usually starts with 100 players jumping out of a plane traveling in a vector across the 8 square kilometer map, at least if we're talking about the original map. The player must loot playable areas for armor, guns, and equipment, and during this time the blue zone begins to come in and starts sectioning off the map, so it forces all the surviving players together. So during this time there's gunfights, there's collecting, there's preparing for the blue zone to come in, but at the same time other planes do fly in and offer some top tier loot as well during this time. This is of course all random, including all the loot drops. There are also hot areas of the map, or areas that contain higher chances for better loot. As you continue in through the blue zone, whether it be through on foot or on vehicle, and slaying your way into the #1 position, your goal is to be the last player alive. And this is the basic formula for most Battle Royale games. You know, you have a team or a person, you whittle it down to the last player alive, if you're lucky, of course. Even though this is the basic formula of most Battle Royale games, PUBG does something special with it. It has a unique blend of realistic gun mechanics with also some unrealistic mechanics like the healing and some of the vehicle properties. It really creates a unique blend that most players, I hope, will find pretty enjoyable. We should really talk about the developer, right? Because this isn't the only Battle Royale game mode on the market, so how do we know this developer is the one to go to when you're talking about a Battle Royale experience? We're actually going to look back at the designer, the lead designer at Bluehole Studios, who produces this game, that really has heavily influenced this market. His name is Brendan Green, or better known as PlayerUnknown. He actually kind of got his influences from the 2000 movie Battle Royale. He also got heavily influenced by games like America's Army and Delta Force Black Hawk Down. And he started developing his idea of a Battle Royale game mode after seeing some mods from the DayZ video game. The key points he wanted to focus on in his game was that it was a large map that was hard to memorize and a lot of randomized loot to keep the games fresh, unique, and challenging every single match. His first opportunity to make his dream come alive was when he was asked to consult with Sony Online Entertainment for their new game mode H1Z1 King of the Hill, which has similar objectives to what he was hoping to have. Fortunately, he did get to move on to Bluehole Studios and be able to start working on his own project, PUBG. Now that we have a little bit of background on where this game came from, let's actually talk about my critiques and things that I like, dislike, or am neutral to in the game, and I'll go in a little bit of depth in each topic here. Starting off, we'll start with the good section. Things that I enjoy, I love the gun variety in the game. There's plenty of good guns. There is plenty of iconic guns like the M16 and the AK-47. And then there's some more guns that are a little bit more unique or niche, things like the AUG or the Groza. There's plenty of different types of weapons between pistols, SMGs, assault rifles, LMGs, and sniper rifles. Not to mention there's plenty of equipment and other armors and attachments and things for all the guns that really make the game unique. I want to go more in depth about the gun mechanics though, because I really do enjoy the semi-realistic mechanics that the game does provide between the bullet drop-off and the heavy amounts of recoil depending on which platform you're playing on. Really does play into the difficulty of the game, but also makes it way more rewarding when you do get you get a gunfight, you win, you get some kills. It's great. It's actually really excellent, and that's some of the fun that you have in PUBG is learning the guns. Each gun has its own feel, its own recoil systems, what attachments work with it best, what sights you like. That's another thing. You can play your own playstyle with a lot of the attachments. A lot of other Battle Royale games right now do not have the ability for you to have attachments. The big competitor, Fortnite, does not have this option. They have tier ships of weapons. This game, you can take a weapon that may be low tier ship at first, or not quite as good, and then bring it up to be a lot better with just a couple attachments. Things like, I like to think of the M16 being kind of not that great until you get a sight on it, because it's more of a sniper, a blend between a sniper and an assault rifle rather than just a full auto assault rifle like the AK-47 or something like the HK-416. Another thing I want to talk about is the inclusion of cars. It's actually really useful in such a large map to have these cars here. It actually makes the gameplay a lot more fun in that regard. Games like Fortnite do not have cars, but even with their smaller maps, it still makes it kind of a pain. Not to mention they can be used for transportation of you and your team together in quick fashion, but also to take down enemies if necessary. Another thing that I do enjoy is the Xbox One controller port. If you look at one here, actually, if you look, most of the controls are pretty simple, pretty standard for a shooter, but a lot of the quick pads options are really useful. Things like pistol, grenades, and health equipment are just right there, which is actually, in my opinion, since I don't play a whole lot of PC, really nice. It makes it easy. You can go from a gunfight to just hitting this button to start healing yourself, and you can switch quickly between all of the medical options. That being said, it is a little clunky, but still, it's a really nice thing to have when you're talking about a console port for a game with a lot of controls and options. Another good thing about this game is that the price point is only $30, which is half of most AAA titles. The final thing I want to talk about is microtransactions in this game are pretty minimal compared to a lot of other AAA titles that are out right now, so you're not spending quite as much money. That $30 point is about what you'll be spending unless you play on PC. You can buy keys for certain crates that you do unlock, but that's still not really necessary since they're all cosmetic items, so there's no pay to win. This isn't really funding a lot of the gameplay. That $30 really goes towards the game itself. Next, we're going to talk about some things that I'm kind of neutral towards, things that aren't so great but aren't so bad either, that could use to look at but isn't really necessary to make the game much better. Starting off with vehicle mechanics, some of the vehicles work really well and they are great to have, but other ones are a little bit more risky to use, things like the motorcycles and the dune buggies. And sometimes even the boats are actually a detriment to your team because of the way that they handle. An example, the motorcycle flips over a lot, which makes sense, it's a motorcycle, but you could really go from having a great game to having your entire team wiped because the vehicle flips over. It happens sometimes, and I think that's an okay mechanic, but it happens quite a bit, and I don't know if that's a map design issue or a vehicle issue or player issue for all I know. I could just be really bad with vehicles, but when it happens, it is really just gut-wrenching when you have your whole team wiped because a vehicle flips over and then explodes. The next thing is the desert map, which is only on the PC at the moment. I don't like it. I don't personally like it. I'll play it if I absolutely have to. Like when I'm on stream, I will definitely try not to have to switch out constantly on the maps, but I don't know if it's map design or it's a player issue or it just doesn't flow as well as the first map. I think the major issue is that there's just not a lot of cover and there's a lot of open areas, which really doesn't play well with a lot of the gameplay that I'm expecting out of PUBG. The only nice thing about the desert maps is that sniping, this is where you want to practice. This is where you get your long-term engagements, the areas that you have over 400-meter gunfights. That's the map for it. And finally, bad things. This game is great, and I really do love it, but there are some gleaming errors that really cause issues, and they need to be addressed sooner rather than later. The first bad thing I want to talk about is lag. It's really rough sometimes depending on connections and everything, especially on the Xbox. Not to mention the frame rate issues that the Xbox also has. On PC it's not a huge issue because I have a pretty high-end build, but on Xbox, where I'm running the original Xbox One, it can be rough sometimes. Now it has gotten better over the last few updates, but it's still not anywhere near what PC has, which that's standard for most games anyway. But I do think it's important to mention that before we continue on with some other points. My next issue is the randomization of loot in this game. It's a good thing because it keeps the game fresh, but it's also a bad thing because, realistically speaking, it controls so many of the games. Not just with loot either. The randomization of the zones, what equipment's on the ground, where players kind of distribute. It makes it unique every time you play, but it really makes it unfair sometimes. And my examples are when you drop in a high-risk area and get nothing for it. And when I mean nothing, I mean barely any armor, medical supplies, weapons. It happens a lot of the times, and that's, it's part of the random factors, but when you spend your time and drop in places that are risky, you expect something out of it. You want loot out of your gameplay. And it happens a lot, and I think that they need to make it more clear on what areas have a higher chance or what. Maybe if they release some of the statistics on what drops and how often and where it has a higher chance, the game might be better. At least for the players, so they kind of have an idea. But at the same time, it does lead to a lot of times where you will drop somewhere hot and get nothing for it, and then die when you can't even defend yourself. It happens And I think that's sometimes a good thing because it makes it more fun. If you knew where all the loot was going to be, you would have a lot more clumpage and the map would just be barren most of the time. Either way, I think the randomization in the game could use some work, or at least give us enough information to know what our odds are sometimes. The next thing is probably the largest downside to the game, especially if you're playing on PC. It's the hacking base of the game. There's a lot of players who hack the game, primarily coming out of China, that are really destroying a lot of the online games, and it just makes the game unfun to play. An example, I have some gameplay here of me and a friend getting close to a victory when we get killed by a team of hackers. That was a 20 to 30 minute game lost because of people who aren't playing fairly. This is being fixed, however. The developers are removing a lot of accounts that use hacking, and they've already removed 1.5 million accounts. So it is being fixed, but it's still an issue, and it can really make this game unfun when you are playing on PC. Xbox, I haven't ran into one yet, so hopefully that stays that way. The next thing is kind of it's bad, but I don't know how bad it is compared to some other games, and it's incentive to play. When you play a game, you want something. Most of the time, it's physical. At least I play a lot of games where when you play, you get something out of it. You get a new piece of armor, or maybe a new weapon. But in this game, you get credits towards getting more aesthetic options. That's it when it comes to physical physical items that the game provides. That being said, a lot of other games have that, like Overwatch is purely, cosmetic incentives. You get crates, you get aesthetic stuff, you get sprays and stuff, that's it. Maybe that's what this game needs. Maybe it just needs more customization options to make it feel like you earned something, but as of right now, you're really either going for kills, wins, or cosmetics, which I don't think gives you enough incentive for a lot of players to continue playing over a long period of time. My next negative thing I want to talk about, which is really just more of a personal gripe, is that I don't like the reviving mechanics in teams. It's a little long. 8 seconds is a long time to sit there while you're in the middle of a gunfight. And only if you get interrupted, you have to redo the 8 seconds. I don't mind that it's 8 seconds, as long as you're able to continue reviving if you have to pause for some reason. But as it stands right now, you stop reviving, you have to restart the 8 seconds. It can be a real bit of a pain, especially in the middle of a gunfight. Another thing that the developers need to work on, which I don't think this is actually bad, this is more just like I'm hoping in the future, they need to polish the game. There's a lot of lag issues, bugs. I have gameplay. This is it right here. I was thrown across the map on Xbox. Never happened to me on PC, but it's just one of those little things where it's just, don't let this happen. I'm not sure how it even happened, honestly. But little things like that need to be polished, either be graphics, bugs, or exploits that people can use. The game needs to be polished further. And that kind of really wraps up the negative things. I do hope in the future they continue to develop the game, which they are, like new maps, which I have one right here. It's a really small map, hopefully changes up the gameplay, to more guns, to just different mechanics, and hopefully really fine-tuning the game into something that is flawless, or as close to perfect as you can get. Overall, I still really enjoyed this game, with the intense gunfights and the excellent team play, which I highly recommend when you are playing this game. Get a couple friends online, play together. And there's still plenty of updates to be had. They're adding new maps soon, hopefully they'll have new guns and new cosmetic items, and they're still updating and fine-tuning the game every single week, at least for the PC. So it's still a growing and thriving game with a community that's huge and over 30 million sales. It has to say something about the quality of PUBG. My final rating is going to have to be an 8.5 out of 10. It's a really solid game and I really do enjoy playing it. If they ever add new stuff, maybe some new modes, maybe some more maps, more weapons, more cosmetics, more. I want more PUBG. I can easily give this game a 9 or a 9.5 out of 10. It's really an excellent game. With the review done, I do want to hear about your opinions on the game. Have you played it yet? Have you seen some streams? If you have an opinion that maybe you want to share with me, or something that maybe differs with my opinion, let me know down in the comment section, or hit me up on social media if you have any questions about the game before you purchase it. Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to come back next week as we discuss Subnautica, a survival horror game in the ocean.
All around me